But I do want to invite Andre Cohen and William Moore from the Facilitating Racial Equity Collaborative to come on up and meet us in a discussion. I'll see if I can get more lights to turn on so we're not in the dark.
Actually, if we can come up and kind of create a circle or a space where we can at least build a sense of community, given such a small space. Small. My notes. So the way I like to kind of start this conversation is kind of the way that I do in class, and that is to have people kind of think about one thing you found interesting, one thing that you found interesting, one thing that you learned, and one question you have about the film. So if we can just kind of think about it in those terms, and then kind of get into what our experience was with the film. So
you want to do, before we all do it?
Yeah.
Just a small, introduction. So I think I can pretend like I know you at least. Again, my name is William Moore, and I lived in St. Paul for over 30 years.
Cool.
That's all.
30 years.
Over.
You got me beat. Greg Copeland. I lived down the street here on Cook Avenue off of Payne for 25 years. And we've met before. I ran around to politics, right? I'm running for school for it.
Ah, wonderful. Okay.
Welcome across the board.
Across the river.
Oh, the river. Yeah. Yes, I missed you.
And James Meyer with the St. Paul Library.
I'm Janat Tasneem. I'm here with the Advocates for Human Rights. And I also live in Minneapolis.
That's okay.
My name is Amy Everman. I've lived in St. Paul a little over a year. I'm actually a native of Milwaukee.
Oh, sorry.
I'm Renee Melberg. I'm a student at Luther Seminary, but spent the last year in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and actually at a church that worked very closely with the Hamilton family. So I've met Maria, Nate, and Damian, and so
wow.
I was very excited to see the film here after leaving that environment the past year. So thank you for bringing me here.
Cool. My name is Andre Cohen, and I live in I live in Mounds View, which is close to St. Anthony, and so this film is brings back a lot of stuff for me in regards to how we have dealt with our own stuff here in the Twin Cities. So cool. And I use that as a framework in case we don't have any those three questions, in case we don't have anything to say. But I have a feeling we may have some things to say. So, what were people's impressions, or what came up for you as the film was kind of developing the narrative?
Just the fact that they right away made it about mental health, and how 8 months later he said, "Oh, well, there was a bulge in his pocket, but he didn't reach for it." But just how right away, I mean. There were some good things that happened as a result of this tragedy, but it still should have never happened. And it's like so much needs to happen with police. They shoot before they even learn what's going on.
Okay.
And I'm so frustrated. I'm so sick of hearing about these stories of people's lives being gone because of police who don't know what to do other than aim a gun at them.
Other folks, what kinds of things came up for you?
Well, I'll jump in. What the heck? The last comment here on the screen and the words about the final report not going to be issued or hasn't been issued.
They've got it.
Well, here's the report right here, folks.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, I think we can believe what we saw and heard out of the mouths of the people that were most directly affected and took it upon themselves to act to bring about a different outcome in the future. And many years ago, I was on a mental health board down in Florida, and there were mental health issues in my family, and mental health's pretty bad stuff. But the only thing worse than that is people getting shot because they're sick, because they're ill, because they're not well. So of brought it all back. You know.
Yeah.
I'll just take a break on that.
One thing I was wondering, not to jump in, but how long was he laying on the pavement? I mean, he was laying in a park. It wasn't, I mean, I understand, it doesn't look good for the companies that are there, but that's one thing I would have liked to know is how long was he sleeping or resting there? I mean, he may have been getting up to get a coffee in 10 minutes, so I just don't see what, laying down in the grass makes someone worth shooting. Like, I still don't see what that makes him. Oh, he must have mental health.
Well, let's be honest, right? So we see a person outside these doors for 20 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour.
I guess
So at what point do we say, you know what, maybe there's something going on, or maybe I should do something? And for each of us, I would suggest that our tolerance for that is probably different. Right, and so if yeah, so I would suggest that our tolerance for that is probably different. And laying out in front of these doors out here, many of us would not suggest that is behavior that we're accustomed to seeing. Right, so you combine that with the erratic behavior or behavior we're not used to seeing, and the different levels of tolerance. So, people, if you don't know stories, you create stories, right? But the scary thing is, what's the little monster back there that actually creates the narrative, right? What's the monster that's in the back of your mind that creates the worst case scenario, the worst narrative? And I think part of that we have to recognize and have conversations about, right? So, other folks would.
I was shocked that every single time there was this systemic squashing of what seemed like the truth. I mean, that's the hardest thing for me all the time, is that we get right up to where, they let him, they were able to uphold his firing, but they gave him his disability, and they were able to get it to the, federal level, but they found a way legally to. It just, it always happens, and that systemic stuff just kills me. That it's so profoundly pervasive. I just complaining.
No, that's fine. Other folks.
Well, I'll take another shot too.
Yeah.
Listening, obviously, the system doesn't listen well at all. I mean, the one time that the Hamilton family won anything was getting him not to get his job back. Period.
Right.
Down at one point, and but look at all the other times that they had gone forward with the facts, and the other side's commentary was woefully inadequate without any basis. I used to be a city manager. I mean, you gotta put something on the table, and there was nothing there. And to say there's a bulge in the pocket, that's going to be a knife. I mean, this is just crazy and totally unacceptable. And you can see how this sort of cancer is allowed to manifest because nobody does anything to stop it. Nobody says, "Whoa, we're gonna get to the facts." I mean, I had a little more respect for Barrett. Or Barton, is it Barrett?
Barrett.
The mayor than most of anybody else in the show, because he at least, anybody who wasn't in the victim, obviously the Hamilton family gets your total respect, but at least he did stand with them at a couple of press conferences. I mean, as an outsider watching the movie.
Yeah.
And I'm not in the same party as he and all that, but I did respect his actions for actually coming clean and saying, your son, wasn't homeless. Your son wasn't a criminal. All that. I mean, because some people don't want to hear that. And I think you deserve something for saying the truth.
Exactly.
Truth shouldn't be so limited that it gets to be congratulated. But unfortunately, this scenario and the patience of the family, my God, who would be so patient?
Right.
My wife and I spent 15 years fighting State Farm over an automobile accident. We'll go into the details, but she got brain injury, and she lost. She lost at the accident. She lost in the court. So anyway, I had a lot of empathy for what they were going through, because they were very moderate at all times. It seemed to be way past what a lot of people would have.
So here's a question I'm going to throw out. Is the system broken?
Well,
Absolutely.
What would indicate that it's broken? What are the indications?
The fact that they always cover for each other.
So they always cover for each other.
And it's good that they enacted that law that requires an independent investigation, but it has to be truly independent, not former police officers collecting a $4,000 a month pension. I mean, they're not independent at all. They're
Okay.
still biased.
Okay.
The deck is stacked.
The deck is stacked. So when you say that, what do you mean?
I mean that every term there's some power system so that you don't hear reality and justice. You hear the power system just finds another way around it. And that's what I mean by the system is broken. There's just another way to circumvent truth and justice.
So what indicates a broken system? So what are the indicators of a broken system?
well, obviously, again, I go back to listening. I mean, if you don't even have the capacity as a public official to listen to people, and I don't mean after 2 years of fighting, and the federal government has to come in after every other state.
So hold on, let me back up. Let me break the question down even further, right? You go to a new car lot. New car. What is your expectation when you get in the new ar? They give you the keys. What is your expectation?
Very low mileage, new car smell,
New-
and work going off the lot.
Works going off the lot, right? If it doesn't work going off the lot, do you buy that car? No. Why?
You've got 11, and you take it back.
Take it back. Doesn't work. If we have a system that continues to function, then we don't have a broken system. We have a very well functioning system.
Yeah, if crushing people is the goal.
Then we must ask, what is the goal of the system, right?
Well, systems exist, and they will always go back to equilibrium. They always want to go back to balance of how systems have been created and how they've been functioning. That's just the nature of
It's the nature of systems, organisms, right?
yeah.
You
Human
can
bodies.
human body. We go back to equilibrium. We go back to blah blah blah. So if this equilibrium, go ahead.
Well, I'm just trying to think because I went back to almost one of the first things in the movie about the broken system of, I think an indicator is when they didn't even call the family to say you would have heard it on the news.
I couldn't believe that.
So and there's no ID, so where's the respect of that? So what I'm struggling with is like, if that is within a working system of whoever definition, like what's the equilibrium of like, we don't need to call because what off-center is that, or what narrative are we making with that?
Yeah. Well, what does that suggest? I mean, they're total clues because broken systems at some point no longer function. But these particular systems continue to function. So I think the real question is, what do we think the system should be doing, or and what is it actually doing? And so not making the phone call is another identifier of the cognitive dissonance between what we think the system should be doing and what the system is actually doing. And so we have to ask that question, what is the system actually doing?
Well, this system thing, I'm not so sure. I think you got to have individual people that are in this system. This is, we don't get to say it's a system and it's anonymous and autonomous and it's not a part of us. Because in this country we do, I'm a big government guy, I guess, in that sense, but we have elections, people make decisions, people get in positions. Things are supposed to happen because we're spending all this money to make good things happen, we want to believe. And when they don't, I think we got to have some accountability. And we have to be able to understand things that are unpleasant as a community that we have to remedy. And if we continue to believe, oh, everything's fine and we're just great and we're the leader and there's never a problem, and gosh, we win all these awards and we're number one or number two, and if we're number three, we get the number two next year, and we'll be number one in 3 years. Well, so I'm not the system thing. I maybe in science, but I think in the human world where there's people who call upon the police, 911, right? They make that call, they have expectations. The fire department, whatever it is, and
You call 911 in Milwaukee, you get put on hold. I had that happen.
well, that's not an expectation. It's,
But it's a reality.
Well, and my friend is saying the thing about systems is not that means it's okay. It's just a reality.
No, I understand
It's just a
you're
reality
improving it,
of
but-
what systems do, and they do it in.
But that word
organisms.
system-
And how many shootings do there have to be for it to be?
No, I
the
believe
system?
in systems.
It is. I think it's a
believe that there's an entire configuration, and I'm not a.
But systems are made of people at the moment.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's not autonomous. It's things happen for a reason. There's no getting away with you had a bad day. I don't buy that.
Those people that are in power are very systemic about how they keep people who have no power down, and that isn't necessarily all personal. I mean, personal. It's not all personal. Sometimes it's an overpowering set of trying to get everybody to be homeostatic, just like it always was when we have all the power and other people don't. And so that feels systemic to me. It's not just personal.
William,
No, you need this. You want to say something, don't you?
I guess I just want to, bring it back to what do people think the system should be, and bring it back to there's some reason that it's functioning, right? And so if we don't think about criminal justice as a system that keeps us safe, but instead a system, like you said, that keeps existing power structures in place instead, it's probably doing that function pretty well, and that's why it's still going.
There's something to be said about just that name, criminal justice, and what that system gives. Having been through that big building down there and been indicted by a grand jury because I made a statement on a campaign, and then the prosecutor is over at the legislature saying, we shouldn't be indicting politicians for campaign statements. But I'm sitting outside the courtroom and they're ready to prosecute me for doing it. So, my tolerance for the anonymous system and the textbook, it's just some example out of it's real lives, it's real people. You can't see it any more than in this movie, right, with that family and the loss of their son and that father in this picture, right?
So, go ahead.
These are real people.
So, my first impression of that movie was, what was lasting to me was some of that, the father in Kenosha. He said it was about who got the story out first.
Absolutely.
Right? Who controls the story? As I understand the movie, they actually had his license in his wallet. They knew who he was. They wouldn't have been able to go to the mom's house if they didn't know who he was. They deliberately, in my opinion, did not do anything because they were trying to figure out what to do.
Exactly.
And this notion, it is interesting to me. The second thing, let me stay on the task. The second thing that came for me was that this was complicated. I mean, I wouldn't imagine. I couldn't imagine. I mean, I'm a father of 3, and if my son got shot 14 times, I don't know what I would do. I don't know how I'd respond. And it was complicated because, to me, the family really kept eyes on what they wanted done for their. This whole idea about that, it took them 8 months for the mayor, or 6 months, for the mayor to come to say, okay, well, let's change the narrative. Let's say that he wasn't homeless, plus he had keys. That's the other thing. House keys. They knew all this. The police officer, and the last thing for me was this, in this conversation when you're talking about the system, and you brought, well, who is that? Who is that boogeyman, that system person? I work for Hennepin County. I am part of a system. I used to be part of the criminal justice system as a probation officer. And I keep thinking, how do we make a change? We need the individuals working in the system, right? To do that. That's the individual stuff, right? It's complicated, right? Yeah, that's all I got from it. It was, I was impressed with the fact that the parents were real clear about what they wanted. I really loved the fact that the mom, when they were going through that whole violent thing, she said, "I gotta live here.
Right. True.
This is my home too." It's complicated. That's all.
A couple of things I just wanted to kind of toss out was this idea of intersectionality. And have people heard of intersectionality or that? Okay. So, for those folks who may not be as familiar with it, it's the concept of when one or more oppressive ideologies are applied to either person or injects a person into a system that their multiple identities creates an anomaly that subjects them to negative treatment in some kind of way. And so, for him, what were the intersections of his identity that caused him to be put kind of in the crosshairs, quite literally, of these officers? To Dantre, yeah. What were the piece of his identity that propelled him into this conflict?
I'm thinking race, perceived mental illness, and perceived homelessness. They didn't know, but they made assumptions.
So those assumptions kind of thrust him into those pieces. Okay, and his brother had a criminal record that they kind of tried to apply to him.
That was after that.
Yep, it was after the fact.
Is what is happening now, right?
Yep, so intersectionality can be what is happening currently, but it also can be longitudinal, so it can be within that process. Sister, you just came in, just want to get your impressions of the film. What were some of your thoughts?
I don't know. I
Okay.
got a whole lot of things going on
Okay.
through my head, but it's just hard to perceive, period, to me, altogether. Like the question you just asked, like misperception at first, like homelessness, like what you said, was mental illness, or him just actually not taking the time to even just on an appearance perceive that there may be something wrong here, before the escalation.
Yeah.
So
Who were you referring to that who didn't perceive it?
the officer.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I don't know if it fits your question.
Yeah.
It made me think of this, that how ironic it is that the first time he isn't passive. We don't hear about anything in his past that of criminal nature.
Thank you so much.
Striking against the system.
Yeah.
of doing one thing on one day at any time in his life prior to that day in the park. And he didn't initiate this circumstance, in my opinion. And what did he do? Well, he got to wrestle with the policeman, because the policeman got he had to show him who the boss was, I guess. I don't know. It just strikes me that way. And then he got the baton, and that was it. That was it. And that's otherwise, the guy had done nothing to hurt anybody and brought joy to his family, and there wasn't any issue. I mean, it's just like, so any one of us, on the way home tonight or tomorrow, because somebody has to get their little ego program going, and they can't control it.
It's just,
That's how I saw it.
Right. And I don't want to. I can't allow us to kind of villainize all police officers as if.
I'm not villainizing all.
Right. But what we're kind of using these kind of broad, because there are good officers that are oftentimes subdued again by systems. So I'd just like to throw that in. Because we have to be considerate of that as well.
But the police let their own pride get in the way, where they're unanimously supporting a guy that clearly had failed. And that's why these human systems don't work, is when the people in the system fail to admit to the situation as it truly is, to the facts.
Yeah.
Right, I mean, they could have at least admitted it and paid the family some money. Or, I
didn't think they didn't sue them. So, you go to your question. What did he do? What was he was sleeping?
No. My question was around this idea of intersectionality.
Yes,
So what were the intersections that thrust?
That fact that he was laying
Right.
on the ground.
Yep.
In the middle of the day.
In the middle of the day.
In front of a public space, and of a particular coffee shop, not just. Because that coffee shop has some implications.
This is a coffee shop.
Starbucks has some implication about their clientele, right?
Mm-hmm. They called.
Yep, they called.
They were the ones that were concerned.
Yes.
But everyone said that he wasn't doing anything. He wasn't breaking the law.
Right.
So is it against the law because he was laying there taking a nap?
No.
Sleeping?
No.
Okay, so I'm sorry.
It just shows you how little
Up
crime
on
there is
the
in in Milwaukee.
Approaching him, where
I believe he woke him up.
comes into play. Do you think because of his mental illness, or just because he reacted, out of fear, not ever being in trouble like this gentleman saying, or not ever being confrontational, or feeling like he hadn't done anything wrong, or maybe he was just in fear because he had never had a confrontation with an officer before, so he could have just panicked and went like whatever, just to raise his hand, and the officer just assumed that he was attacking him.
Yeah.
Well, the officer was patting him down, wasn't he? I mean, if someone started feeling me up, I don't think I'd be too happy with it either. I'd probably start feeling my arms,
Yeah, I'm just thinking maybe there was just some misunderstanding, probably on both parts, because he might have been afraid of the officer if he'd never been confronted before, never been in trouble, or with his mental illness triggering off that someone putting their hands on him. Maybe no one never ever touched him before, really, and he could have just gotten,
agitated or whatnot, or he was asleep, and he as William was suggesting. So this is one thing that I try to approach things with an even hand, right? So I have never been an officer. I've never been an officer. I have fired a gun and gone to the range, and so I can understand what that sensation might feel like, but I'm not trained to do that, right? So I do it as recreation, right? So, but we hold those particular people at a higher standard than we do the rest of us, because they're trained to do so, right? And so, I think one of the questions that I wrote down that I want us to kind of think about is, in terms of, thinking about civil rights and thinking about mental illness versus people not getting services and that kind of stuff. Are things getting better in terms of those things? In terms of, yes, well.
Oh, no.
Okay.
I don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know.
Okay.
You would hope so, but there was a whole thing about
It's not your experience? Okay.
I don't know what the facts are.
So if they're cutting funding, that
Funding on a state level.
And I guess because I don't know what's not getting. You talking about with mental illness or with what
services, mental illness, in terms of race relations, blah blah blah. Here's my point. There's a lot of stuff that's loaded, right? So here's my right. So here's my point to that particular question. What if things aren't getting better, and what if they will never get better? Then what is our responsibility right now? Right. It is my belief, after watching the development of this new administration, watching the old thing go away, seeing Jeff Sessions undo all of the things. So even the Philando Castile DOJ projects that they haven't gotten the final report, but I'm sure they have the final report, won't be a part of anything. And the DOJ's interaction with police officers or with policing agencies is just advisory. So even though they have they have no teeth to actually make things happen. And where things can happen is in the police union. I don't know if you noticed, but the police union chief was with the governor, was with the federal agents, where the police chief wasn't even with the federal agents, particularly as it was shown in this particular piece, right? So what is our responsibility? If it is not better, and if it won't get better, what is our responsibility now? What do we do now?
Shift those unions so that they stop talking about their own personal pocketbooks and start talking about the rights of the people they serve. Get in there and say, this is what matters to us as a worker as part of the system.
Okay.
Bless you.
No.
So anyone else have any thoughts?
I'm part of a Facebook group, and for my community, the Hamlin Midway neighbors, also the Nextdoor app. And one thing that people are doing and suggesting is, instead of calling the police, if they see kids hanging around, just going out and talking to them, or getting to know their parents. And instead of just calling 911, it's something they think they're nervous about. Get to know your neighbors and find out, hey, it's like trying to intervene instead of calling the police, because when the police show up, people get shot. And a lot of people are just saying, obviously that won't work all the time, but getting to know your neighbors and recognizing, hey, that's Mary's son over there. Maybe I can talk to him and say, sure, you want to be looking in those car windows or whatever. But I think a lot of it is just stop being so worried about people and just get to know your neighbors.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Well, I got to put in a little plug for acting locally. Because frankly, regardless of the outcome of the election in November, the idea that we should always be looking to Washington. I mean, I'm running for school board, and we got people that weren't even born practically when the act was on disabilities was put in, and they're all talking about how that 40% never came from Washington. That was promised for 40 years. Well, okay, I guess it's not coming after 40 years. We got to deal with these things here ourselves and make funding decisions about the level of service we're going to give to special ed students. That's what I was trying to get at. And the same thing with all our other systems. We have to take responsibility and stop looking to Washington. I think we need to look at the courthouse, we need to look at the state house, we need to look at the school board, whatever. But, Washington is, they're spending money they don't have. They've got, just with this healthcare thing, boy, I'm glad they're not in charge of, my doctor's office over here. Because, I don't think I'd end up in a good place. And, but honestly, the idea that, we keep bouncing it up the line when it doesn't work at home and nothing really changes. I mean, even these federal investigations on places where they've gotten the final report, are they better off? Because I don't think so. Because the people that invested, it's like the mom who said, I got to live in this community. And if you care about where you live, then you're going to do something.
Yeah.
And if you don't, well, then, you're not going to be part of the change making that, But and you have to put a little into the pot here.
Cool. Any other thoughts, comments?
The only thing that I want to say, because I never have a place to say it, is that, but probably a lot of this happened because of race. Mm-hmm. And that is, it's like, yes, there's the intersectionality of it, but, it's painful to me that a lot of the things went down step by step was about race, and that's the worst part. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
I like silence because I want someone else to.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that's okay. You broke the silence.
Yeah, no,
And so is always what I say to that, because I can't change my complexion, but we can change how people see that, maybe, because it's about the narrative, right? Why is it that me being a black man conjures up an image that might not even fit who I am?
You can talk to their neighbors, say, look at this differently.
Yeah.
And they need to get out there. I mean, just having friends from different backgrounds, it's easy to demonize people you don't know. If you only know people who look like you, other people are going to be kind of mysterious, scary.
But we start this all so early. Our school system. You mentioned union contracts. Teachers get to choose when they get senior enough which school they want to teach at. They want to teach little rich white kids in this town. The students who need them, the experience that we're paying the extra money for, are the 77% of the kids that show up that are poor, they're children of color. And what are we doing? We're letting the union decide where the so-called best teachers are teaching, because they don't want to teach poor kids. We have an educational apartheid problem in St. Paul.
Okay. But let me address this, because I taught. So let me just put my head in. So I would suggest that may in fact be true. But as a mental construct, as a mental construct in the United States, what we say is that if you are really good at something, we will promote you past what you're good at doing.
Should be promoted past teaching poor children?
So when I taught, the thing that was very interesting about my teaching was that I was good at what I did as a teacher. If I wanted to get more money, I had to leave teaching and become an administrator to feed my family. So it is disingenuous to suggest that people don't want to teach poor kids when the system itself is constructed in such a way that it promotes me past what I'm good at. If I wanted to stay in that classroom for my entire career,
doesn't make up the teacher's contract. The teachers union does.
But what I'm suggesting is that is a system. So I can't let you take a shank. Right. You can't take a shank to teachers without me making that statement.
Okay.
Right.
But wait. That I don't know. I'm not sure how that.
Jump on teachers now.
How complicated it is. Actually, that's a wrong statement, because every teacher in St. Paul cannot teach at high.
I didn't say every.
No, I'm just saying. You just said, and here,
the teacher contracts lets the senior
that's okay.
teachers.
Even that don't matter.
Decide not to teach.
He tried to get me off of it, and then he jumped on it.
In Highland, there's 30% people that are getting premiums, like maybe 35%. So, that's not it. And
I live near Vento, William.
Okay.
Okay? It's 99%, okay? I mean, honest to God, it's been 99 since I moved here. I remember when...
that's one school.
It is, and it happens to be the school in my neighborhood.
Then you should be volunteer.
Okay,
Anyway,
you try to get me off of something you got sucked in yourself.
See, I'm not going to defend
So
the system.
here.
Well, don't. But when you get in it,
I've been in it. That's why I'm giving you an analysis I'm giving you because it's real.
So
When people go to the bargaining table and they insist on a contractual provision that gives them power,
anyway,
okay, there's a
right.
reason for that.
So we
Children are not winning.
Yeah.
2/3 of the kids can't read at grade level, can't do their math at grade level. That's been going on for 25 years. I've been in Minnesota. We've been talking about the achievement gap. Do you want to do something about it, or just want to keep having seances?
Yep. So all I wanted to do was bring us back and to really think about that the false dichotomy that is presented to us is that things will be better or things are on some kind of scale. And if we think about what if things are to get better, we have to do something now, that we have to be engaging. And I think a number of neighborhoods have taken up the next door neighbor app kind of thing. It's interesting that my interesting neighbors put up their interesting stuff, but it is a device that has been helpful in getting neighbors to connect, right? So even if it's around goofy stuff. And so we need to think about other ways. Back to not calling seeing if you can talk to the kids who are peeking around or paying attention before you call the police. Not that you don't want to call the police, but there is just there may be different ways that we want to be a village in not only raising our kids, but sharing resources together. And the police will be the first folks to tell you that they can't change a neighborhood, but we have the ability to change a neighborhood through our relationships and the development of our relationships. And so that's what I'd like to leave you with, and that we have seen far too many versions of this story, both nationally and locally, and I'm tired of seeing films like this. So I think it's time that we really start to not only work with police officers, work with the unions associated with police officers, work in our communities, because oftentimes people will throw off things and say, if there was no crime in their neighborhood, we wouldn't have to respond in that way. And that also is another false flag because, at any rate. So those are just some things to kind of walk away with. So, yeah.
So any last words?
I had heard the story about, so I started in Milwaukee like the week after the Sherman Park riots, quote unquote. And I had heard the stories that some of the first people showing up to clean up were Maria and Nathan, like the Hamilton family. And so that really showed to me, this wasn't just about their family, but this was about their city and the neighborhood and pulling people back together to try and prevent the next incident, because people are looking for something bigger and beyond them, and to hold on to those hope and memories for something better for the future, not only for themselves and their families, but this city and everyone.
I think they kept their eyes on the prize that just changed people's minds.
Yeah.
And it's amazing.
Well, they created tremendous moral authority in doing that. And nobody else in Milwaukee, apparently, in this film, had that moral authority. And it just shows the power you can create by doing the right thing, if you will, and keeping your dead brother, as Andre was.
Well, there's a whole lot of people that don't have more of your county attorney in Hennepin County did the same thing when he had an opportunity to prosecute or put on trial. He decided not to. He probably used the rubber band thing too to explain why he did it.
I've never seen that before.
That was embarrassing.
That was embarrassing.
Our last attorney general, not Attorney General, but State Lugar. What was it?
Yeah.
Prosecutor.
Yeah,
federal.
federal. He did the same thing.
He did.
Yeah.
Same thing.